Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Humanscape. I'm your host, Florian Gargaillo. Today, we're joined by Erika Arcadia, the owner of Hudubam Book Traders in Clarksville. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, all right. So, and good context with the whole bookstore thing and everything. Actually, my story right now is the bookstore. There's so much life and energy that goes into it, and the way it was set up and the win of it, especially in getting through COVID and things like that, I feel like that's my kind of identity right now. But I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas. I moved to Clarksville as a military transplant. And it just worked out that I could stay here, go to school here, and build a life here, and make friends like Aubrey Collins, who it was her vision originally, and her enterprise to set up the bookstore, and be a part of this thing. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Growing up, were there bookshops that mattered to you in particular that got you interested in reading?
Yeah, well, okay. When I was younger, like, books were more like a thing that existed in theory and that I couldn't really get a hold of with my family. It just reading wasn't really looked at as a priority, which made me really dependent on school libraries, big time. Couldn't even go to, like, the public library. That was like a whole thing. So, any kind of reading that I did, I'd pay attention to what other people were reading and just wait my turn on the list to get things like, I'm thinking of, like, I hope I got the name right, Lloyd Alexander's Westmark and stuff like that, that everybody's passing around. So things like fantasy especially were the books that I loved back then. Gosh, back home back in Wichita, Kansas, we have Watermark Books, which is still there, has been for many years. And that was the place where once I really got into reading and wanting to find specific things and ordering them and stuff like that, they took care of me. And they're still kind of on the reader circuit as a place to stop in the plains if you're an author and want to be seen. So that's that's a lot of what inspires me as far as what we're trying to build on Franklin. So
Interesting. What is it about fantasy fiction that was so appealing to you, and maybe still is appealing to you?
It is. I mean, I've got, right now there's a book running around called, I think, The Dawn of Everything. And I have it. Of course I do. And I've read about that much. And most people that I talk to have read about the same, where it promises to tell us, like, what the real human story is. And I love that stuff. I do. And I also love the way it feels to reread Dune. And, and go back and look at, or read The Hobbit with like I did when I read it for my kid, when he was young, and had these experiences with fantasy. A lot of, the area that I grew up in, the climate that I grew up in was tough. And so, a really great escape, like none other. We had a lot of escapist film and movies and things like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it seemed like to really have that moment with the story, you had to read it. It had to be in your hands. You had to be somewhere quiet. Just the whole experience of reading was, especially fantasy, was something. It was all of a sudden incredibly accessible because you can just let your mind do all the casting and set directing and stuff like that. So, yeah. So,
I was curious to hear what you think is the role of an independent bookstore in a community, especially a community like Clarksville.
Okay. It wants to be here. I feel like it's something that I don't have a lot of control over. The community came during COVID and kept us going. The community comes in and makes requests and wants things. And so just by virtue of the fact that Aubrey opened it and we're here, people are finding us, but also telling us exactly what they want. We do trade in, so we have, everybody's used books in there as well. So it's this this picture of Clarksville and what Clarksville's fantasies are and what their interests are. And you'd be surprised. It's an 860 square foot area, but like we're able to cram in this universe of information that comes from neighbors, that comes from grandparents, that comes from, you know, people who have moved through with the military. And so I feel like a bookstore becomes this sort of saturation point for a community knowing itself. And so I felt that I was born in Fort Scott, Kansas, and there's an independent bookstore there that's run by this woman who's been there forever. And can go to any pile of books and know exactly.
Wow.
She's one of those. Yeah. And she's the one who got me into Margaret Atwood. I remember that moment. And, you know, she was able to connect with me when I was struggling with the identity of being a writer, which I still do. I'm like, well, let's not even talk about that. But she offered all of these things to kind of inspire me and help me out of the store. And I mean, we just did that with this kid who wandered in off the street the other day. He was looking for romantics. He wanted romantic poetry. A guitarist that he had a lot of respect for was inspired by romantics, and could we help him? And so I'm over in poetry, like helping him find it. Meanwhile, Amy, who works with me, is getting queuing up music by the guitarist to play in the space. And then I found exactly what the kid is looking for. He opens it up and sees it. He's like, oh, you're not gouging me. I'm like, no, I would almost give it to you for free, as you know, but as badly as you want this. And you know, he was looking for community, looking for inspiration. And this is a kind of a library, a collection that you can walk in and actually leave and own something from it that has already served its purpose with somebody else. So I love that. I love that the people have come and participated in the space in that way. So, yeah. Sorry.
Fantastic. Okay. No, thank you. How did you get into the book selling business?
My friend Aubrey, you know, it was her big idea, and it was a big idea. She opened the place originally on College Street, and I mean, there we had these murals. There was this wonderful artwork inside. The setup was set up to be mainly, she was looking for a place that would be a writer's hub. And we're still open to that. We're still, like, writers are finding us, and we will support local authors any chance we can get. But, like, what the store has evolved into is more of like, this is where readers find each other. And that's kind of how things changed through COVID. But yeah, I mean, the original setup was really exciting. It had an energy. And if you know Aubrey Collins, you know that energy is good, peaceful, awesome, centered. Like, whatever she's got herself into, you want to be a part of that. She's just that kind of personality. And so, it was, you know, I started working for her part-time. I can go into it. We were actually, I was working for her part-time. It was it was the slowdown after the opening of the store. And so we had kind of fallen on a really tough time because we were robbed, which it was, I know, everybody's fine, but we're not. I mean, it's traumatic. It was a whole thing, and all the money that we had been, you know, working so hard to make was just literally walked out the door. And so we had this moment where she told me, she's like, don't even go near the store tomorrow. And in fact, she came to my house after this had happened, and she was like, had this questioning look on her face. She's like, we got robbed. And I'm like, what? Like, who robbed? Nobody understood that one at all. But it had happened. And it was just this sort of violent kind of, you know, you talk about conversation in a space. That was not a good one. And so I went to the store the next day when she told me not to, because I still had a key. And I just wanted to sit in there alone and just kind of meditate on the place. And then she showed up, and she's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, what are you doing here? And she's like, you want to go for a ride? I'm like, okay. And we came downtown, looked around at spaces, like made a few phone calls later. We had the new space and realized that the energy there would be just completely different. We'd be in a community of stores and not so isolated, and there were just a lot of positive things. what really kicked in, Aubrey is the kind of person, she would never say anything I just told you, like about a robbery or any kind of negative thing like that, or hardship. But I told everybody. I'm like, okay, look, this has happened to somebody who really wanted to create community. Can we please collectively send a message to her that that's not what we think, that's not how we all feel. And everybody, like I'm wanting to say somewhere between 25 and 30 people, a mixture of yoga teachers, people from the Unitarian Church, like all of these professors from Austin P. Everybody came, grabbed a box, and we moved a whole bookstore in one weekend with that help. The outpouring of the love and support for her was something that still, it kind of makes me, it makes me feel very emotionally, charged by that, where, when I say that the story is there because of the people here, I mean it, that there was this moment where we were wavering. It's like, gosh, do we really want to do this? And the answer was yes, we want you to do this. So it was quite a moment. And at that point, that's when I decided, I'm like, look, I want to invest with you. Can we partner up? And at that point, when we moved to Franklin in September of 2018, that's when it was the two of us just making decisions fast, moving on them, and experiencing a lot of really great energy through a lot of pretty trying times in business. But I'm very happy to say that the store's still here. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful story. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
I know. Okay. Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us and
I
telling us
appreciate
about your
that.
story.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guest, Erika Arcadia, for joining us today, and join us again soon for the next episode of Humanscape.